There's a lot of cars in this museum, and one of the first questions that anybody asks me, a visitor, when they come here is, "Big Daddy, what's your favorite car?" And it's always this car right here, Swamp Rat number 1. This is the car that put me in the limelight in drag racing in America, or probably the world, because it was the first car over 170 miles an hour, and it didn't just break 170, it blew right through it.
When you rebuilt Swamp Rat 1, what motor did you put back in it?
It's got a 1957 392 cubic inches, stock bore stroke, 8 carburetors on 98% nitromethane, and makes about 750 horsepower. And after I restored the car, I took it to Bristol, Tennessee, and drove it down the drag strip 182 miles an hour. It went to Bakersfield in 1965 for the first time to the U.S. Fuel and Gas Championship. It didn't do well. We couldn't make this 426 run. It was running in the 190s and the 8s. And the 392 cars were running 210 miles an hour in the high 7s. I won the big race out there. 120 fuel dragsters were entered, probably the biggest fuel dragster race in the history of the sport. Had a 64-car field. That's 6 rounds. They couldn't do 6 rounds today if their lives depended on it. Anyway, with Swamp Rat 6 in the building, I won the race. Come back to Tampa, and my boss at Chrysler, told you I've been with him since '61, said, "Don, we want you in the 426 car. We don't make 392s anymore." I said, "Frank, it don't run as good." He said, "It just ain't tuned." He said, I said, "Swingle's been driving it, it just don't go fast." He said, "Nobody's going to get it to run good unless you take it out on the road and tune it. Now, I want you in that car." Okay, yes, sir. So for 1 year, I struggled with this car. The Greek beat me in 23 match races. Can you imagine how embarrassing that was? I got beat in the first round at the Nationals. I won nothing. And it all came to a head at National Trails Raceway on a Saturday night in 1965. It was a race against Jim and Allison Lee. I won the race. I had top speed in low ET, 192, 8.13 seconds, and I made all 3 rounds. And I was supposed to get $1,250. I go up to the pay master, which was old man Radar. He paid the money himself. He's sitting there behind his desk, got a 45 caliber service pistol laying there. That was my sidearm in the military. I was a master sergeant in the artillery. That 45 was my sidearm. And he had $500 laid out on the table. And he shoved it at me, and he said, "You lay down on me tonight, Garlits." I said, "What are you talking about? I made all 3 runs, I top speed low ET, and I won the race. You owe me $1,250. Now give me my money." He said, "You didn't go 200 miles an hour. And of course, what should come out of my mouth, but, well, maybe the track surface wasn't good enough. Oh my God. The old man grabbed the pistol, put his finger right on the trigger, and moved it right at me. He said, "You're saving it for tomorrow. You got a match race in Rockford, and you didn't want to work on it. Now get your $500 and get out of here. Don't ever come back." His hand's just shaking. That fucking pistol pointed right at me. I said, "You don't have to worry about me. I'll never be back." And I didn't go back till he died and the son took the track over. And I did have a match race at Rockford, but I wasn't worried about working on it. We hadn't done nothing to it. The motor was bulletproof. So we're driving down the road, and I tell Bob Tabb, he's dead now too. I said, "Bob, I'm going to blow it up tomorrow. We're going home and get the 392 and give the Chrysler deal up." I said, "What good are engines if they don't run good?" He said, "How do you intend to blow it up?" He said, "We haven't even put a rod bearing in it in 6 months." I said, "I'm going to put some spark clean in it. That's what I'm going to do." We had the 392 tune-up on this motor, and that called for 34 degrees spark clean, but it's only a 110cc chamber. This had a 176cc chamber, a bigger chamber. It needed more lead, but we didn't know that. So very carefully, I loosened the mag with my buzzer and I moved it to 40 degrees and set it right there for the first run. Now on the 392, that would make a decent run. A good run, but it would split the cylinder wall and water would run down in the pan, and you'd have to drain the water out of the block, put new oil in it, and you could make one more run, and then the engine would be completely dead if it didn't blow up, because the walls would have been split so much then you couldn't even make a run. But you could get 2 runs out of it. So we have this 40 degrees in it, and the thing goes down through there. 213 miles an hour in 7.51 seconds. New world's record, if we'd been at a record event. Of course, it didn't count there because that was just a match race. We run back to the pits, we put it up on jack stand, drop the pan to see how much damage is in there. There's nothing. The oil is brand new. There's no water dripping out of nowhere. I pull a couple of rod bearings out. It ain't even made a run. I screwed that thing back together, put the pan back on it, and I took my wrench and I loosened the mag, and I just did this and tightened it up. That's called the Bateman twist. That's an inside joke. John Bateman had a funny car. On every final, if he got to the final, he'd loosen the mag and give it the twist, and tighten it back up. And of course, that was the end of the engine, but he would usually win. So I gave it the Bateman twist. Later, when I checked it with the buzzer, I had moved it 12 degrees. It was now 52 degrees, which just happens to be the magic number that they ended up with these big engines, these 426s. When you see a funny car or a dragster going through the lights, they start with 65 degrees just off the starting line, and then the computer pulls the lead back to 52 degrees. That's what they like. I took the ride of my life. I let that clutch out and it sucked me back in the seat, and I just hung on. 219.84 miles an hour in 7.31 seconds. And nothing was hurt. The 426 had been awakened. We had awakened a sleeping giant. And we called it the elephant motor because it was all cast iron and weighed about 100 pounds more than the 392. But I found out they had aluminum heads for NASCAR, and so I started using them. And then Millodon made an aluminum block, and I got that. And then later Keith Black got an aluminum block, and I used that. A funny story about it is the Monday morning following this event, Keith Black engine, and Keith Black himself called Centerline, which is the parts depot in Detroit. And he says, what's it going to take for my company to be the distributor for the 426 engines on the West Coast? And the guy says, you heard about those runs that Garlits made yesterday? And Black said, I did, and somebody said he didn't even hurt anything. It must be a really good engine. And the guy said, that's right. And Black says, what's it going to take for the dealership? And the guy says, you'll have to take a tractor trailer load of 426 engines. And Black said, send them. And so he became the big shot 426 guy, and he made the aluminum block with the Chrysler part number on it. And of course, the rest is history. And the reason is, this engine was designed by Chrysler to run NASCAR. And it was to go 500 miles and to make exactly the same horsepower on the 500 lap that it was making on the first. And to do that, it has to be real strong to hold its configuration. And so for that reason, the spacing on the cylinders and the crank is real good. And well, they get 1,100, 500 horse out of them now just for a moment, you know. Just a moment. 3 seconds, that ain't very long. But it speaks highly of the engineers. They did a nice job. I got a cute story to tell you about the engineers. When I was doing the rear engine car, it was a real drawn out procedure. And for 3 months I struggled with that until I figured out how to get the thing to go straight. And they were having a seminar in Clearwater, and the ram chargers were there. And the guy that designed this engine was Tom Hoover. He was the father of this engine. And one of the kids in the audience said, what do you guys think about that rear engine project that Garlits is doing over at Scepter? And Hoover said, at Chrysler, we have the utmost respect for Don Garlits' accomplishments and his innovation. But this time, we think he's bit off more than he can chew. That's how bad the rear engine car was viewed in the eyes of even the engineers back in those days. They just didn't think it would work. But so many had crashed. But there's been a lot of them, you know, mine was not the first. Hell, I raced a rear engine car from California in 1958 at Houston. Red Chase was there. I got pictures of it. It was a nice little rear engine car. We had one, 1957. We built one for my brother for gasoline. A replica of it's in the building. Just drive right off the drag strip. Dangerous. That's it. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too.